Ready.
Okay, we're going to call our meeting to order. First thing is roll call. Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Wynant.
Present.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Prenner here. Next thing is to set the agenda. Anybody have anything, changes, adding, subtractions, anything on the agenda today? Any changes, Nick?
President Prenner, staff have no adjustments.
Okay, then we'll need a motion.
Madam President, I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call it. Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Prenner, yes. Okay, approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, this is Manager Wynant. I move we approve the minutes of the Rice Creek Watershed Board of April 12th, 2021, the workshop.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call. Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Prenner, yes. Motion passes.
And Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of the April 14th 2021 regular meeting of the Rice Creek Watershed Board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Prenner, yes. Motion passes. The next thing today is our consent agenda. We have a few permits here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is there anybody that has any questions about any of the individual permits that they'd like to pull out and discuss further?
Madam President, I have two questions on two of them. I don't know, we have to pull them out.
Well, no, go ahead. Questions?
Okay, so the first one, Patrick, is on permit 21-022, page 4 of 5 of the report and page 27 of the packet. There's a chart which talks about existing replacement ratios for existing upland buffer of 1 to 0.075. And I was wondering if that shouldn't have been 0 to 0.25, since in the two paragraphs up, it says it was identified in permit 96136 that the buffer area would be credited at 75%. And then they didn't do it. So, well, is that the reason why? Because it's replacing the 0.75, not the remainder.
Yes, Manager Bradley, I can speak on that a little bit. So, yes, the difference here is in the area of buffer that is provided compared to what is actually credited. So the actual impact amount for the buffer is 11,112 square feet, which equated to 75% of that is credited. So that's why that amount is lower. It's a little bit unique here in that this isn't just, direct wetland impact. This is to an already established mitigation area. So that's why it's a little bit strange. But the 75% does tie into how that project was originally permitted.
Okay, thank you. The next one is equally important. Permit number 21-027, which is on page 3 of 4, which is on page 33 of our packet. There's a discussion in the last paragraph, second to the last line, I think, says the project is the applicant has provided 11,730 cubic feet of water quality volume, which treats portion of all streets and reconstructed with a project area. The 11,730, based on the chart above, only relates to the permeable pavers. It does not include the underground filtration. And my question is, why isn't it not including the underground infiltration pipes?
Yeah, Manager Bradley. The key here is the separation of the table. There is an asterisk under the table that talks about seasonal high water separation. So the underground infiltration pipe and those other 3 items in the bottom part of the table do not meet the standards for rule C for water quality treatment. So they're providing a benefit, but just not in the permitted sense.
Thank you. That answers it.
Any further questions? Then I'll entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move that we conditionally approve pending receipt of changes. The applications noted in the table, which is 21-016, 21-022, 21-027, 21-031, 21-033, in accordance with the engineer's findings and recommendations contained in the engineer's report dated April 21, 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call for a vote. Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion passes. Next thing on the agenda is the open mic. Is there anybody in the public that'd like to speak today in regard to anything that isn't already on our agenda? Anybody have any comments or questions for the board today? Hearing none, we're going to go to items requiring board action. Updating memorandum of agreement, the city of Centerville. Patrick? Yes,
President Priner, this next item here relates to RCWD permit application 20-014. It's for the downtown street improvements project for the city of Centerville. The application itself has already been conditionally approved. This item relates specifically to the memorandum of agreement. It was an agreement that was established under a past permit, 1075, for the water reuse system. And with the improvements that they're proposing here and the use and expansion of the system, we are looking to amend that memorandum of agreement to match what is now proposed. And this also serves to identify the maintenance obligation that the city has for the system. So this is an update to that agreement to meet a compliance item for permit application 20-014.
any questions for Patrick?
Madam President, just a couple. Not related to the changes that refresh my recollection, understanding of this project. On page 52 of our packet, paragraph 2 refers to redevelopment area on the map attached here to as Exhibit A and incorporates into the MOA altogether delineated area. Are the redevelopment area and the delineated area the same?
Yes, it is the portions that will be utilizing the system here.
Okay. Not sure then why we did that, but that's fine. Page 55. There's a picture of what's going on here. So where does this stormwater, how does this stormwater get from the delineated area to the pond?
Well, I guess I'd like to have Chris Otterness check in on that as well. It is a reuse system for irrigation, so it's not running off into a basin from the downtown streets. I guess if maybe Chris can kind of speak on that a little bit further.
Madam President, Manager Bradley, I guess I don't have a lot of specific knowledge regarding how everything is plumbed in on the site, but based on what I can see on the graphic here, you know, it looks like we have an existing pond that's out there that already has water coming to it from stormwater infrastructure in the city, that they're pumping water out of that stormwater pond into that area to be irrigated. They also have other area that they're, I guess maybe what I'll say is that they're using that to offset other areas in the city that directly drain into Centerville Lake. So that is one of the reasons why they created this project, was so that they could try to treat area in the city that you know, wasn't treated before, and use that as an offset for other projects that they're working on. I don't know if that answers your question, Manager Bradley, but again, it's existing infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure that gets the water to the pond before it gets pumped out of the pond to the irrigation area.
So if we were taking water out of Centerville, it'd be obvious that we had the direct connection between the redevelopment area and the reuse. But I would assume a pond that close to Centerville, that if you drain the pond, it's just going to fill up from Centerville. I mean, is that a reasonable assumption?
Manager Bradley, I think that pond is likely, the elevation of the pond to be higher than the elevation of Centerville Lake. That'd be my understanding. Again, I'd have to take a look at the specific detail regarding the design, but I do believe that it's far enough from the lake that the water levels there aren't necessarily linked to the lake itself, that they're more driven by how much water is inputting into that pond that they're drawing from.
So that's what I'm really trying to understand, where the water comes from for the input into that pond.
It's coming from the adjacent streets and homes that are drained by storm sewer into the pond.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. President Preiner, sorry to
ahead.
interrupt. I'm obviously sharing my screen. Manager Bradley, this is the pond. This is an open ditch that contributes to the pond, and this is stormwater outfall from the city, like Chris had noted.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the agreement? The proposed motion is on page 50, the regular packet.
Madam President, I move to authorize President Preiner and Smith Partners to sign the revised memorandum of agreement between the City of Centerville and Rice Creek Watershed District for the reuse irrigation system in Lamont Memorial Park and Hidden Spring Park.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Now we'll call the vote. Manager Waller,
Yes.
Manager Winan,
Yes.
Manager Bradley,
Yes.
Manager Wageman,
Yes.
and Manager Preiner, yes. Motion passes. Hey, Beth, you're next.
Hello there.
A beautiful annual report. Continue.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. I have just a short 3-slide PowerPoint that we do usually kind of as we prove this. So my computer's just kind of taking a little bit of its sweet time. So you've all received a draft of the annual activity report for 2020. It is required under Minnesota law, and this year we will submit it to our manager at Bowser, the Commissioner of Natural Resources, and the DNR's Division of Ecological and Water Resources. The time period for when it is due is at the end of this week, and so we are wrapping things up to submit it. As you are well aware, it's an assessment of the previous year's annual work plan, projected work for the next year, which we are already well into. There are other administrative criteria, including the audit and some financial information information that will go along with it that you've reviewed in the past. We have an evaluation component in it, and we include 13 activity reports with their work plans. Last year, we spent a lot of time and effort to align it with the watershed management plan for the district. This year, with the new MS4 requirements, we worked hard to make sure that we were addressing our MS4 needs within this plan as well. It wasn't required, but it's one of those situations where we can improve our own efficiency and kind of go for two birds with one stone. So we worked with staff, had some meetings to really make sure that we were presenting information in the annual report in a way that would also meet our MS4 requirements so that we wouldn't have to do additional work there. So the status right now for this year's annual report, I'm still reviewing the formatting, looking for some of those typographical errors. Thank you to some of you who have made suggestions, found some typos, or had some suggestions on additional information or how you'd like things formatted. We're integrating all of the board and staff comments and corrections. The staff has been great. We've got some really fun pictures that we're using this year, and that's kind of exciting. And then the last thing we do is make sure we go through and have the table of contents and the photograph table align with everything, and that's just kind of the formatting piece. So if you approve the annual report, we will make sure that it is submitted to Bowser, the Commissioner of the DNR and the Director of the Division of Ecological and Water Resources by this Friday. So are there any questions for me?
Questions for Beth, anybody? None? Oh, here. Then we need a motion on page 58.
Madam President, I move to approve the 2020 annual report with any necessary formatting and non-substantive changes and authorize submission to the Board of Water and Soil Resources, the Commissioner of Natural Resources, and the Director of the Division of Ecological and Water Resources of the Department of Natural Resources by the deadline.
And Madam Chair, I am pleased to second that.
Okay, we have a second by Manager Wynant. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call a vote. Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
And Manager Pryor, yes, motion passes. Okay, thank you, Beth.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is the Mr. and Mrs. Is it Selesky regulatory compliance hearing, and that starts. The information is on page 117. And I will go ahead and open the hearing. I'm going to read the first paragraph. Everybody good on that? The Rice Creek Watershed District Board of Managers at this regular March 24-21 meeting directed the staff provide notice of compliance hearing so that the board may consider the issuance of the compliance order for violations of Rice Creek Watershed District permit rules and related to this property. Please take note that the regular meeting on April 28th at 9 a.m. today or such time thereafter the matter may appear on the agenda. The Rice Creek Watershed Board will hold a compliance hearing on the Rice Creek Watershed files number 17-068 and 20-060R. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and open our hearing with, I believe, Terrence and Patrick, and we might have other staff that comment. I'm asking that when you do comment, please give your full names and your position on the staff for the records, please. So who would like to start?
Good morning, Manager. Oh, go ahead, Chuck.
Anybody? Art Chuck?
First of all, this is Chuck Holtman. It appears that Natalia Seletsky is attending this morning. I just wanted to confirm that and ask if Ms. Seletsky can hear me.
Yes, I do. Do you guys hear us?
Yes, we do.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, before we begin, do you wish me to just review the structure of the hearing for the benefit of the managers and for Ms. Seletsky?
Yes, would you please do that? That'd be good. Thanks.
Okay, I'll do that. So this is a hearing in which evidence will be presented through testimony and documents. It's, of course, not a formal court proceeding. The people giving testimony are not going to be sworn in, and the strict rules of evidence don't apply to the documents and the testimony that either district staff or Ms. Seletsky wishes to put into the record. But the hearing will generally follow the format of a court hearing. That means that first, district staff will present testimony to give the background of the matter and review what they believe are violations of the district rules and of district permit 17-068. I believe that Terrence Chaston Davis and Patrick Hughes will testify for district staff, and the violations to which they will speak are as follows. The first one is vegetation disturbance, fill, and grading in protected wetland buffer in violation of the district's wetland alteration rule, Rule F, and permit 17-068, and in violation of the easement and the declaration that are recorded on the title of the property pursuant to the requirements of permit 17068. The second one is fill in the floodplain of Anoka County Ditch 5362, Branch 1, without a floodplain permit under the district's floodplain rule, Rule E, as well as the erosion and sediment control rule. The third one is the failure to maintain signs marking the edge of the wetland buffer in violation, again, of the wetland rule, Rule F, and of the recorded declaration. I'll also note that there's a fourth item, which is a shed that partially encroaches into the wetland buffer. Staff, to my understanding, is not recommending that this be considered by the board today as part of its order. It's something that was in the permit, but staff, I think, is not asking that you go forward on that one today. You obviously can have further discussion about that. When each person is done giving testimony, Ms. Seletsky will have the opportunity to ask him questions, and then the managers will have the same opportunity. Mr. Chaston Davis and Mr. Hughes, as part of their testimony, also will present their recommendations to the board as to the terms of the board's order if the board in fact finds that there are violations. When district staff are done, then Ms. Seletsky will have the opportunity to present her case. You may present facts that do or don't show a violation. You may speak to the proposed terms of the order or speak to anything else that is relevant to the matter today. You'll then be subject to questions from the managers. And when you've completed, then district staff, again, will have the opportunity to respond to anything that you've raised. At the close of all the testimony, we'll make sure that all the documents offered for the record have been recognized and included. President Preiner will preside over the hearing. I would urge the managers that you raise your hand either on the Teams platform or your actual hand and be recognized by President Preiner before you speak. This part of the hearing, of course, is about questions and answers. And I'd ask that you withhold discussion and expression of your opinions at that time. Once all the testimony has been given, then you'll discuss the facts, whether and what violations you believe are shown, and what terms of an order are appropriate to address any violations that you find. For that purpose, you may refer to the 7-page proposed order that was provided to you earlier in the week and also was provided to the Seletskys. This document is to facilitate your discussion. Obviously, you have the complete discretion to alter the terms in the order to conform to your own view of the facts and your own judgment as to appropriate terms of an order. There are also blanks in the order to accommodate what Ms. Seletsky may offer and anything else that comes up at the hearing this morning. If any changes or additions are limited, you may be in a position to adopt a final order today, but otherwise, and more likely, you'll instruct staff to take your discussion today and revise the proposed order and bring it back to you at the next meeting. Finally, my role in the hearing is as counsel to the Board of Managers, so I'll be attending to ensuring correct procedure and a complete record and answer any legal questions that the managers may have. So if there's any further questions or discussion on what I've reviewed, I'm happy to answer questions. Otherwise, President Preiner, I'll return to you and to Mr. Chaston Davis.
Okay, is there any questions from the board for Mr. Colton? Any? Okay, we're going to go to Terrence. You're first, and make sure, like I said, identify yourself and your position on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Terrence Chaston Davis, District Inspector / Technician at the Rice Creek Watershed District. Today I will be presenting the different facts and record documents that were compiled regarding matters of this property of concern. Before I get started, I wanted to recognize some of the other parties that are in this meeting this morning. And Chuck, I don't know if they need to speak or if I can just call them out. I've already kind of seen who was here, but
well, Terrence, you can note their names for the record, and
okay.
Then if later in the hearing the board would like to hear from them, then President Preiner can invite them to speak.
Okay, sounds good. So I believe we have the City of Blaine, Rebecca Haug, in the meeting, and then we have the Anoka Conservation District, Becky Wozni, in the meeting. And then there also are the developer, who is Tracy Rust, from the Excelsior Group, and then Ben Schmidt from the Excelsior Group. So those are some of the other parties that I believe are in the meeting right now. So yeah, I will be sharing my screen quite a bit. So please let me know if you cannot see anything and I'm talking about something, or if you have any questions. So before I really jump into things, I just wanted to again confirm that the notice of compliance hearing was emailed to Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky on March 25th, 2021. That notice was also provided via U.S. mail. And then I did receive confirmation via a phone conversation with Mrs. Seletsky on March 31st, 2021, that they did receive the notice of compliance hearing. So first off, I wanted to just share a little bit about the property. And of course, I'm missing something that I had pulled up before, so give me 1 second. Okay. So, first off, wanted to kind of talk about the property of concern and some of the adjacent features. So we have the Oakwood Ponds development, which I will talk about a little bit more in detail. And then in green here is the parcel of concern, 4919 125th Avenue Northeast. We have 125th Avenue, Lexington Avenue, and then there's some various other developments in the area. And then the blue dotted line here is representing our public drainage system, Anoka County Ditch 5362 Branch 1. So now zooming in onto the property again, you have the Oakwood Ponds development to the north, parcel of concern in the green, our public drainage system, 125th Avenue or Main Street. And then highlighted in this pinkish color here is the approximate area of concern as it pertains to fill and disturbance within the wetland management corridor and regulated floodplain. And then we also have highlighted in yellow here, this is approximate area of disturbance but not fill within the wetland management corridor. So that's just a little bit about the property. Again, the public drainage system does flow towards Main Street here. So I wanted to just touch base real quick about the permit that was issued. So the Oakwood Ponds development permit was issued in August 14th of 2018. And before you hear as a permit, I just wanted to highlight that there was co-applicants on this permit. It was not only the Excelsior Group who was the main developer for the development, but there was also a few other families that were involved. Mr. Biskey was the original owner of the property that we are talking about today, 4919 125th Avenue. So that permit was issued back in 2018. This is a part of the plan sheet of that permit, highlighting the property that we were talking about today. Again, most of the development, you can see new homes going into the north. Everything on this property was existing. Kind of in this shaded area that's highlighting the wetland management corridor. And then we also have the floodplain that probably a little hard to see on here, but the Rice Creek Watershed District floodplain boundary is also highlighted on this plan sheet. And I'll be coming back to this here and there, but I just wanted to highlight, the initial plans for the development. And then moving on to some of the recorded documents and legal documents that were a part of that Oakwood Ponds development. You have the plat, and even within the plat, there is a highlight of the property that we are talking about today. This is a parcel, kind of in this detail A, you can see a more highlighted area of that property. I'll call out that the DNU easement is shown on here as well, which pretty much aligns with where our 100-year floodplain elevation is on the property. So that is kind of a nice visual to see. You can see it even in this plat that has been recorded to the property. And moving on, so we do have the easement description that was approved and recorded to the property. This easement is for the wetland management corridor that was a part of the Oakwood Ponds development and their approvals. So this does show where the easement is on the property that we are talking about today. This document was recorded along with the wetland management corridor declaration. Both of these documents were recorded on August 9th of 2018. So just before the permit was issued. Again, the permit was issued on August 14th of 2018. So these documents, per our approval of the permit, were recorded to have these things recognized on this parcel that was kind of a party to the original development. This is a figure from the wetland management corridor. This is a figure from the wetland management corridor that was a part of the wetland management corridor declaration. A little tough to make out on this recorded document because there was quite a bit of color on the original figure, but this is a parcel that we were talking about. You can imagine this is a public drainage system here. I know Mr. Holtman did talk about the shed, and it's called out on here, but you can't really tell what it's pointing at on here. But this is, again, recorded to the property, or was recorded to the property on August 9th of 2018. So moving on, I did just want to highlight utilizing Google Earth, which I've kind of utilized in other various mapping materials to kind of review some of the things that have taken place on the property. So this is a highlight of the property from 2017. You can see that the property to the north, and I believe this parcel did extend further north before it became a part of the Oakwood Ponds development and kind of replatted and everything. But you can see likely some farming going on up here, our public drainage system here, some of the existing structures, farming, different things going on. 2018, rather similar activities. Nothing has really changed with these properties. And then moving into 2019, you can start to see the rough grade of the Oakwood Ponds development that is taking place, the working on the road. And then focusing on 4919 125th Avenue, we were starting to see, or in review, I noticed that it appears that there was activity going on, either filling or disturbance at the time. And then you can even see it extends further north, which I'll note. The parcel lines are divided by the public drainage system. So anything up here, if it did come from here, which it appears it did at this time, is technically trespassing. So I just wanted to make that note. But you can see just some of the activity that was going on here. It obviously looks like there's been some changes to the property. And then finally, this photo, I apologize, a little blurry, but again, Oakwood Ponds to the north, focusing on this parcel. You do see, again, that there was some, almost appears that a road was created or fill or access to get to the back of the yard. So just some observations that I've made off of reviewing some aerial photographs. And I will note, so I talked a little bit about when the permit was issued back in 2018 and some of those recorded documents. The parcel, per county documents, the parcel was sold from Mr. Biskey to Mr. and Mrs. Slutsky on March 1st of 2019. So that is when, per county records, when they came into ownership of the parcel, which again, you can see not much going on the property, then some slight changes taking place on both properties, even Oakwood Ponds and 4919 around 2019 based off of these aerials. So I just wanted to make that note. Moving forward, I'm going to jump into just kind of a narrative of the events that have taken place and how we got to where we are now. So back in October 30th of 2019, I was made aware of potential violations on the property, but as email exchange was shared with me between the developer and the previous landowner, Mr. Biskey. And there was mention of some dirt movement on the property. And then shortly after that, I was actually contacted. We were contacted by Mrs. Slutsky to have a meeting, and we did have a meeting with her to discuss the property, because at the time, I believe the developer was kind of talking with the landowners. So we had a meeting, both myself and Patrick Hughes from our office had a meeting with Mrs. Slutsky in the office. That meeting took place on November 5th of 2019. And during that meeting, we discussed that there's buffer on the property and mentioned the floodplain. I believe we even shared some of the recorded documents with Mrs. Slutsky. And then moving forward in April 10th, or during April 10th of 2020, I was conducting a site inspection for the Oakwood Ponds development. And I looked over and noticed that there was some activity happening to the parcel to the south, which is the 4919 125th Avenue. So at that time, I noticed some activity. This is one of the first photos that I took. Again, in review of those aerial photos, that was that circular disturbance that you could kind of see in some of those more recent photos. And then this is some other activity that I saw. I noticed a skid steer, and our public drainage system, if you can imagine, is running right here. It's kind of tough to see in this photo. But these are some of the things that I noticed during my on-site visit for the development. So after seeing that, I did contact the city of Blaine and just shared with them some of these photos and concerns. And then soon after that, we did set up a meeting to set up an on-site meeting to go to the site. So at that first initial meeting on April 20th of 2020, I visited the site along with City of Blaine staff and a DNR conservation officer. And during that first site visit, we were able, the property owners, both Mr. and Mrs. Slutsky were available to meet with us, and I wanted to make sure that they could be there when we had our meeting. So we were all there present during that first meeting. And during that first meeting, we reviewed the property along with Mr. and Mrs. Slutsky. And I just want to give me a second, just share the photos that were taken during that first meeting. So again, highlighting some of the relevant features. This is the Oakwood Ponds property. property, again, is divided by the public drainage system, ACD 5362 Branch 1. So during our site visit on April 20th, this is some of the things that I saw. I just wanted to highlight that shed that we have discussed previously that was a part of the Oakwood Ponds development requirement to have that shed relocated or moved because it is partially within the wetland management corridor that was set to this section of the property. So just highlighting that shed. And then here you can see clearly that there is some gravel material and fill that has been placed on the surface here. And so these are some of the things that I was noticing during our first on-site visit with Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky. And again, highlighting the public drainage system. In the foreground here, you have disturbance and material that likely was placed. Back in the corner is the wetland boundaries. So again, same kind of looking to the north. Oakwood Ponds is to the north here, separated by the ditch. You can see this disturbance here. And clearly there's been some work that's happened on the property. So those are some of the things that we observed during that first site visit. And, we expressed those concerns with Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky. And at the time, I did request that the DNR conservation officer issue a cease and desist order just to make sure that there's not further work taking place before we can kind of address some of the issues that are at hand. So the DNR conservation officer did issue a cease and desist order because there was concerns that there were wetland impacts after having that initial meeting. So after that happened, there was a second meeting between the City of Blaine staff, myself, and then the Anoka Conservation District. The reason I wanted the Anoka Conservation District to come out was because they are the ones that typically will issue a restoration order for any potential wetland impacts, and the Anoka Conservation District was not present for that first meeting, so I wanted to get them out there to take a look and make an assessment of the potential wetland impacts. So we had that meeting on May 8th of 2020. And then there was a follow-up meeting. I didn't take any photos during that meeting, but then there was a follow-up meeting on May 22nd of 2020 between myself, Mrs. Seletsky, and the Anoka Conservation District, just to make that final assessment of where exactly some of the wetland fill was placed. And that assessment happened. And during that meeting, I did just take a few more photos, similar to what you've already seen, again, highlighting the shed. You can see the gravel surface here. It almost looks like there's been a buildup of material here for this access. And again, highlighting the public drainage system, separating the two properties. I'll note that Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky were open with us and did tell us that there was some ATV activity that took place over here. So there was no fill that was brought to the Oakwood Pond side of things. So that's why you are seeing this disturbed area. And then again, just highlighting some of those things. The ditch, these rods were used to try to, by the Conservation District to kind of figure out how deep the fill was and things like that. Wanted to highlight here, this is looking south. This is that other area that I mentioned earlier in the presentation about the additional wetland management corridor disturbance, but not necessarily fill. So those are some of the things that we saw during that meeting. And then moving on, bear with me, I'm almost done with this narrative. Shortly after, a few weeks after that second meeting with the Anoka Conservation District, the Anoka Conservation District did issue a restoration order that was then served by the DNR Conservation Officer on August 25th of 2021. So that restoration order was served. And then shortly after that, on August 26th of 2021, or of 2020, I'm sorry, the restoration order was served on August 25th of 2020, not 2021. But shortly after that restoration order was served, Rice Creek Watershed District, we did send a formal compliance letter to Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky, and that letter is in your possession and some of those record documents. So that was our first, Rice Creek's first official compliance notice to the landowners at that time. Prior to that, there were a few meetings and discussions, but I wanted to wait to issue any kind of formal compliance letters until we can kind of get a scope of the work and hopefully try to get to some voluntary compliance. So that restoration order was ordered, and then shortly after we sent our formal compliance letter. And then there was a response to that letter, and then we responded again to the letter, to the second letter, and I will share some other documents here. Give me one sec. Sorry about the delay. So, in our second sort of compliance letter that we shared with Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky, we also included some supporting documentation that's before you right now. And in that, again, I kind of highlighted in this figure sheet, I highlighted the plan of the areas of concern. I did share with Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky, and this was discussed during previous on-site meetings, that these documents were recorded to the property prior to the purchase of the property by Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky. And then again, the aerials that we've already kind of looked at, highlighting those areas of concern. And then I did start to try to kind of approximate some of the disturbance area, utilizing on-site measurements and utilizing on-site photos and then aerial review. So this is my first attempt to approximate some of the disturbance area and fill that was placed within the regulated floodplain and the WMC wetland management corridor. So this document was shared with Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky when we sent them a second follow-up correspondence regarding violations on the property. So I'm just running through this real quick. And then again, I kind of came up with the numbers here after doing some measurements. Total filled disturbance, 15,000 square feet, approximately 236.77 cubic yards of floodplain fill. Again, these were rough estimates that were developed utilizing measurements from being on site and looking at photos, and then also reviewing some aerial photography. So after that, there was several more back and forth, and then there was a third site visit that took place on November 10th of 2020. And again, this site visit was between Rice Creek Watershed District staff, myself, the Anoka Conservation District, City of Blaine staff, and then both Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky were present for that site visit. And that site visit was one to review the wetland restoration. Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky noted that they did restore the areas that were noted in the restoration order provided by the Anoka Conservation District. So we went back on site to review that restoration and then further discuss any questions about the outstanding violations. So a few photos were taken during that last site visit, again highlighting the public drainage system, the Oakwood Ponds Outlet C, which is just across the way there, and then this is the Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky property. This was the area that I've discussed where there was some ATV traffic that disturbed, and we didn't have Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky do anything with that. We just recommended leaving it and letting it come to. And as you can see in this photo, that area did kind of restore itself. So there was from the lack of activity on this section, that this area did restore itself. So that was no longer a concern for us. And then the photo doesn't really do it justice, but I'm trying to highlight here where this was where fill was removed, alleged fill was removed from the wetland boundaries. So you can imagine the wetland kind of extends here. So fill was removed by Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky, and we reviewed that, and the Anoka Conservation District confirmed that looked good. So that was fine. The restoration order was rescinded, and then so that kind of addressed that. And then we still have obviously the Rice Creek Watershed District issues at hand. So that was the last on-site meeting, which took place on, again, November 10th of 2020. So moving on, just Give me 1 second to pull up some other documents. So I wanted to just highlight what I've already just covered. This is a high-level timeline of some of the events that took place when we first were made aware of potential violations, and then there was on-site meetings and review of different things. The DNR issued the restoration order, and then again several rounds of correspondence between Rice Creek Watershed District and Mr. and Mrs. Sletsky, and then leading into where we are at now. So on March 3rd of 2021, a new letter from Rice Creek Watershed District staff was provided to Mr. and Mrs. Sletsky, and in that we did redefine some of the disturbance estimates after having further on-site discussions with Mr. and Mrs. Sletsky. They noted that the area to the east, the road where I was talking about before, was actually not filled but just disturbed. So I did refine some of those disturbance estimates to kind of align with that, and took some further review of things that were observed on the property. So in a follow-up letter that we sent to Mr. and Mrs. Sletsky, I created a more refined estimate of some of these disturbances, and that was sent on March 3rd of 2021, and that's before you right now. Shown in red is the area of fill and disturbance. Shown in yellow is this area of disturbance. Again, the WMC Wetland Management Corridor is highlighted by this shaded area on both properties. And then the estimates were more refined after further, again, measurements and things like that. It's estimated that there's about 7,300 square feet of wetland management corridor fill, and then 12,502 square feet of floodplain fill. And then at an estimate of 3 inches, about 116 cubic yards of floodplain fill. Again, these are all approximate, not done by survey, but just kind of estimations based off of site observations and things like that. So give me 1 sec to gather my thoughts. So that's kind of a breakdown of the different events that led up to where we're at now. The last correspondence or letter requesting action that Rice Creek Watershed District sent to Mr. and Mrs. Sletsky was on that March 3rd, 2021 email. And in that letter, we did request kind of a response by March 15th of 2021, looking to try to bring Mr. and Mrs. Sletsky to the table to try to come up with the solutions, make sure we can get everything into compliance. We did not receive a response to that letter. I did reach out via voice or via phone call on March 25th, 2021, left a voicemail, did not receive a response. So at that point, we then decided to bring it forward for a compliance hearing, and then we did the notice of compliance hearing, and I mentioned already that they did. Mr. and Mrs. Sletsky did confirm that they received that notice of compliance hearing. So that's how we got to where we at now. So I just wanted to note the present status of the violations that are at hand. So again, the fill that was placed in the wetland boundaries was removed by Mr. and Mrs. Sletsky. That restoration order was rescinded, so that item has been fixed or came to a resolution, so that is no longer an issue. And that is highlighted in green here approximately. That's where there was some fill that was placed within wetland boundaries, which was removed and has now been restored. The other remaining issues at hand are the fill within the buffer, which I mentioned before, approximately 7,372 square feet of fill placed within the wetland management corridor. And then again, the additional 1,617 area shown in yellow here as just a disturbance area that needs just to be restored. And then there's a floodplain fill, the Rice Creek Watershed District floodplain boundary, and this area is at 899. And again, fill placed within that. The fill is approximately 12,502 square feet, and then approximately 116 cubic yards based off of an approximation of about 3 inches in depth. And then there is the issue of the buffer monument signs that were supposed to be placed on to highlight the wetland management corridor buffer. Now, I did not touch on this earlier, but it's my understanding that the developer was attempting to install those signs all at the same time when they were installing them on the Oakwood Ponds development. And at that time, which I believe was probably late 2019, early 2020, the developer received notification that the landowners, Mr. and Mrs. Slutsky, did not want them putting the signs up on their property. So that never happened. So those signs were never installed, and to this date, to my understanding, have not been installed. And then we did discuss the shed at hand, and that's kind of an issue that we're no longer pursuing. So again, I've already kind of referenced a lot of this, but again, just to highlight the timeline of events, wanted to share this one more time, how we got here, where we're at now. So it is my recommendation that the Board of Managers moves forward with the terms of order that have been shared with you in that findings and fact document. The 4 main issues at hand that need resolution include the buffer fill being removed and vegetation restored within the WMC wetland management corridor buffer. No more ATV/motorized vehicle use within the WMC wetland management corridor buffer. Either a floodplain after the fact permit obtained or that fill within the regulated floodplain removed and revegetated/restored. And then the installation of the buffer monument signs to show where that wetland management corridor is and protect it into the future. And you'll see within those different order items there are suggested deadlines for compliance, and that's just based off of our judgment as a reasonable time to comply, but making sure it's not going into another year or so of compliance or back and forth. And I will just note regarding the floodplain alterations violations, to this date, we have not received an application for floodplain fill on this property. And that would be something that could be considered if an application was brought forward, but we have not seen that. And with that, I think I will close my presentation. I don't know if Patrick wanted to mention some things, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
I think before we go to that, thank you. Mr. Holtman, did you have anything that you need to clarify in that presentation, or that you would like clarified, I should say? Are there any questions from you?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions at this time. Just a reminder before Mr. Hughes speaks to provide for questions from Ms. Letsky and from the board.
Okay. Okay, then we'll do that next. Mr. and Mrs. Selesky, if you'd like to question anything on the presentation, we'd like to hear your comments.
Yes. First of all, the permit that Terrence has showed that being issued in 2018, we were not the owners of this property. And when we purchased the property, no one mentioned to us about the easement or the permit, anything, which we're not being informed. When even we showed our contract to Terrence and we showed to title company, and the contract previous owner has put that there's no easement on the property, there's no issue with the property. Only time he mentioned about the shed after a purchase, a few months later in the summer, he came back to pick up his belongings that he left on the property. So he came in, he mentioned, he asked if the shed been removed, and we said no. And is somebody supposed to remove it? He said, yes, I had been paid to be removed that shed, but the Oakwood Pond supposed to remove it. So he asked if they removed or if they come up and asked to remove it, which we said no. And we asked why they want to remove it. He answered to us because it's close to the pond. When we asked him why it's bothering them close to the pond if it's in our property, he said it's probably because of the view. They don't like that shed. which being a really big surprise for us because there's a lot of buildings on the property and only one shed is bothering. But he did not tell us anything else. And as Darren showing that the document's been finalized in 2018, but when we purchased a property in March 2019, we have a closing in March 2019. There were no signs on the property. The chicken coop or the building was still standing and no records was available to us. We even asked a title company, we purchased insurance, and they come up and check everything, which they didn't find on the property. And no one informed us that we have that a big deal. And previous owner, as I said, did not inform us. Now we have a big complaint about the buffer zone, as I understand, because the disturbance that we had a restoration order and it's compliance now. The kids driving a four-wheeler and the Oakwood Ponds, which we talked and discussed with the Terrence, and he said to leave it alone and it will restore. We just seed it out. We put some seeds that being asked. So for now, I'm not. We did not allow to put the signs because the first time when we met Terrence, he said it's not a big deal. We just put the signs and we can still use the property. But it's on the signs clearly said that there's no movement supposed to be, no grass taken out, or nobody can be there. And we don't understand why we're supposed to allow to put the signs if we don't have on our documents on our site nothing. And after we purchased a property in March, but the other side come up on late 2019 to put the signs and show us the papers that they have from a previous owner. As I think, as we being not aware of this, that the Rice Creek Watershed should deal with the previous owner who signed the permit, who signed the documents that allowing to do that, or development supposed to resolve this issue.
And this is
Vadim is also here, so he wants to say.
Go ahead.
That's a development. He should put signs on timely matter. That would kind of resolve a lot of issues because we would see that something going on this property before we bought this property. Because we just bought this property because of the land. We have 6 kids and kind of feel like it's them to running around. Also, Terence mentioned about flood zone putting, and the city of Blaine, they required us to have a hard surface for a driveway to park a vehicle. They're not allowed to park a vehicle on a grass. They want to have any type of hard surface. That if you saw in the pictures, there's a big shop, and there was kind of a driveway, but it was a grass driveway. And we put a kind of hard surface, class 5 material, to make it hard and legally park as a vehicle on that kind of spot. And we talked to city of Blaine, and they doesn't require any permit for that because it doesn't have access to the road. They only require a permit if you're doing any type of filling or a driveway, if that connect to public road. If that's inside, they said you can do it. Then kind of our conclusion that from our side, we didn't violate anything because there was no anything on our property until late, almost a year later, when we figure out they want to put a signs. And also that Terence didn't mention, on a buffer zone, on a wetland area, there was a lot of garbage that we move out. And that's why we even use a bobcat, because there probably was few loads of garbage. We sent pictures to him where our dogs and cat was damaged by that garbage, because there was nails, rough, some sharp material from previous owners left, and we did clean it out, all of this. And we agreed right now to talk to or to hear result from development or from you guys. We was offered to them if they wanna or if they need it. We kind of agreed to listen what they will offer for us to get this kind of property, because they're almost 1.4 acres of land what they want for buffer zone. And you understand it's a big chunk of land that we can't use it when we will be allowed to put a sign. And first, as my wife said, the tenant said us, oh, it's not big, you can use it. But later on, when we start discuss, he said, no, you not even can drive. As we understand, if you'll allow to put signs, it won't be us, our land anymore. It will be by document, but we won't be able to do it anything. And we just doesn't want to pay a tax for land that we can use it, because it's not fair for us. And that's, guys, we think you will help us out to resolve this issue. And
also, when Terrence showed a picture of the wetland that being disturbed, we did not put the fill in there. The fill that we put is being restored, and I think Becky come over and somebody from City of Blaine came here, and they see that it's being restored. But the picture that's shown, there was a fence going on that side, and Vadim he removed by his bobcat. So that's why it looks like disturbance. And also he showed our aerial pictures from 2017 till 2019. It's clearly understandable if property not being used, it will be grassed out, you know. But if we start driving, Vadim have like 3 trucks, and we have kids driving 4-wheelers, and we don't use a car by that side, but the trucks and 4-wheelers we drive it. The kids driving and Vadim driving the trucks. So it's clearly understandable that this will be disturbed by the vehicles. Also, according, if we will allow to put the signs, there is access supposed to be to the garden, but by the map that they showing, there will be no access to any of the back of the garden. So it's kind of cutting out half of the piece, and there's no access to it. And as I know, there should be a way to do it different way that we can use the garden or use the other property. And if we will allow to put the signs, it's clearly we don't want to people calling all the time to have an issue and violence that we go to the buffer zone because we need to trespass to our back of the garden. So that's the kind of issue, but with the floodplain, I don't see violation for that. Even a Terrence showing that we put some, there's from a map that he showed that being filled with the driveway, there's a tube going through that driveway, and all the water that collects on our side will go to the pond that is supposed to go. Okay. I don't see the violation in that too, but they come and they tested the back of the area where we have a wetland. They tested and they show us what needs to be removed, being removed. And now, as I understand, the more concern is the buffer zone, because the floodplain can be restored, but not the buffer zone, as the signs clearly said that we cannot use it or even go there or drive a ATV in.
Okay, at this point, I'm gonna thank you for your comments a minute. I'm gonna go back to Mr. Hughes for his presentation. And then if you want, we can also comment on that. And then I'll ask Mr. Holtman to comment also. So go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, President Preiner. So my name is Patrick Hughes. I'm the permit coordinator and wetland specialist for Rice Creek Watershed District. I don't have too much to add. I think Terrence did, quite a good job of highlighting how we've gotten to this point in the history of our communications with the landowner. I guess I would more point to kind of a higher level and, the purpose behind these communications, pointing back to the watershed management plan and our rules, and why we have these regulations, preserving that capacity for the ditch 5362 and the adjacent floodplain. That's an item that the district has identified a need to kind of regulate that information, what is filled within the floodplain. The buffer itself on the wetland, ties into the CWPMP 45362, resource protection of the wetland. The disturbance within there, has the potential for nutrients and sediments to move into the ditch or into the wetland. So highlighting the importance of that buffer there. I guess there's other things to address there based on the comments, but I think we'll do that in a separate way.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Holtman, anything you need clarified on our presentations and or on Mr. and Mrs. Selesky's comments?
Madam Chair, the only question I would ask of the Seleskys is that there was indication that they were going to go back and talk to their title company. If you look at the documents, which the easement is document B1 in the packet, the declaration is document B2. Those both contain the stamp of the recorder's office showing that they were recorded in August of 2018. And then we went further at document B4. We ordered an encumbrance report specifically on the Selesky's property, just to ensure that we confirm that not only were the documents recorded in the county records office, but that they were recorded correctly on the Selesky's property. And that's what our report at document B4 says. So, and then the Seleskys, you're saying that the title company that prepared your title insurance commitment for your purchase in 2019 did not take note of those. And we understood you were going to go back and raise that with them. Did you do that, and do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, we did. I have called the title company and asked if we have any easements or anything on the property. They've been 100% sure that we don't have anything, because she said when they checked the property, they couldn't find anything in the county, on Anoka County, any information. They didn't see it, which I have told her that Terrence have showed all the papers for us that it's being recorded, and I asked her a couple times to double check. When she said she will call me back, and when she double checked, she called me back and said, yes, you do have an easement on the property, but they didn't see it beforehand. They only see it in 2019 late summer, when the first time, or it's even already fall, the first time they come here to put the signs, when we start having an issue. So we try to put a claim for the title company, which they said they not cover those kind of agreements with buffer zones or property lines, anything like that. So they recommend us to deal with the developer or the previous owner, because he didn't disclose for us about the easement. So we couldn't find any way for help from a title company. And about the easement, or the previous owner only said for us about the shed after the purchase. On the 2019 summer, he came over to pick up his belongings. He mentioned that the shed's supposed to be removed by the developer, and he get paid for that. But because nobody removed till that time, he said it's your shed, and you're not supposed to remove it if they didn't remove it, because he get paid that they will come and remove it. And also we asked about for him, as he is previous owner since 2019, 57 or so. We asked him about the wetland and all that stuff. He said he have that ditch that being showed on the pictures. If the Rice Creek watershed will clean out on the time, then they won't be even wetland on his property. But we understand.
There was a pasture for his cows, and there was never kind of wetland, but he's mentioned. And as my wife said, that because of the watershed didn't clean a ditch, he said water starts going to his property and kind of create a wetland area. But previously, because he lives here many years, there were no wetland in that area.
But with the title company, as I said, they couldn't find any help just because they mentioned, even they show us their agreement after we start having an issue, they send their policy, send it to us, and it's clearly said that they don't cover that. But before that, they couldn't find it till 2019 when we start having an issue.
And all our documents that we have agreements with Greg, with the title company, it clearly says no.
There's no easements, no encumbrances, nothing.
Okay, Mr. Holtman, any further questions for the Seleskis or for our staff?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll open to the board. Is there anybody else there that would like to testify today to any of these issues? Anybody out there? Different agencies? Comments?
This is Becky Wozni from Anoka Conservation District. I just wanted to say that that was what Terrence had presented was what we had seen as well, and that the only clarification I would say is that we issued a certificate of compliance after the wetland fill was removed. But as you can see from the figures, it was a relatively small area, about 3,500 square feet. It was easier to determine what was wetland and what was not because there was a previous wetland delineation done on the site when Oakwood Ponds was developed. But that's about all I have to say, unless you have any questions for me.
Anybody have any questions for Becky? Thank you, Becky. Anybody else that would like to comment on this situation?
This is Rebecca Haug with the City of Blaine, and I just want to reiterate that yes, what Terrence has stated is correct and accurate. And as far as the city driveway goes, the city does not allow driveways to be constructed through wetlands and floodplains. And so that is something that would have been reviewed by the city and not allowed to have a driveway going through the floodplain or a wetland.
Okay, so let's open up to our board. Does any of the board members have any questions for any of the people that have spoken so far? Anybody have any questions?
President Priner, I see that your managers are using their hand.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see. Let's go with Mike Bradley, please.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, for Mr. Chastain Davis and maybe Pat Hughes, I want to divide this inquiry into the wetland management and then floodplain separately. So the wetland management area, there's some fill on it. Apparently it's class 5 fill. You can't just dump seed on class 5, it won't grow. If it would be cheaper to bring in some dirt on top of that and seed it, would that not be a solution rather than remove the existing class 5, bring some dirt in and overseed that part? That's the first question.
Manager Bradley, President Priner, I would agree that it would be simple to place dirt on top of that class 5 and have that revegetated. I guess the only caveat to that is a lot of the floodplain area kind of intertwines with the wetland management corridor, so there's not really a separation between the two, except for a few areas.
The second part about the wetland, so that I'd like to put that on the side, that may be an alternative solution that we could put in our order. The second thing is, we've given variances in the past. I'm not sure that this would qualify as a variance because all the other variances, the problems caused by not having adequate buffer was solved by not having runoff. So you'd have to put a curb in or something. But if they were to seek a variance so they could still get to their garden and provide some other alternatives, would there be some alternative method where they could still get to their garden and have a shorter, smaller buffer?
Manager Bradley, I'll let Patrick Hughes speak to that.
Yeah, Manager Bradley, it's a possibility, I'd say. I guess I'd also maybe look for Mr. Holtman to speak on this as well. If so, in its current condition, as has been mentioned, there is an easement for the WMC, and then also the declaration recorded on the property for the buffer specifically. So if an alternative was proposed to alter where that buffer is, absolutely, we'd still want to verify if it's possible to meet the rule requirements and provide that 50-foot average. As part of that, we would have to have amendments to the easement and declaration to recognize that updated design. I guess my mention of Mr. Holtman is just to see if that is a possibility, something that we could explore.
Madam Chair, Manager Bradley, that's certainly something to explore. The Terrence spoke to, and the record contains the exchange of letters that occurred over, excuse me, about a 6-month period, in which the district did invite the Seletsky's to work cooperatively so that they could bring forward what they felt were their essential needs of access and use of their property, and the district could look to see if the buffer could be refashioned in a way that it would achieve the district's protection needs, but also provide some accommodation to the Seletsky's. And that's something that could occur, and it would be within the board's authority to make that type of adjustment to the easement and the declaration. But during that period, the Seletsky's didn't indicate that they wished to do that, and that's kind of what brought us to the present moment.
Okay. So would it be possible to, in our order, set a date, 2 dates, a date by which they could present a proposed alternative to mitigate the need to, so they can still get to the garden?
Mm-hmm.
And if failing to do so, then our order would take place after that in terms of enforcement.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Who was speaking? Anybody else going to answer on Mike? Terrence, why don't you give us a thought on that?
Manager Bradley, I would think that would be an acceptable approach, and give Mr. and Mrs. Seletsky some time to consider, further time to consider an option.
Okay. So you can see I'm looking for compromises here. So I want to now flip myself to the floodplain, and we've noted that they could apply for a permit for filling the floodplain. And I'm curious what it would take for us to approve such a permit, because do we have all the information we need now for us to act on such an assumed application?
Manager Bradley, President Priner, I would say we don't have everything that we would need for a permit. Obviously, as I kind of shared, a lot of my estimations are pretty high level, and we don't fully know the extent of the fill that was placed, and so there would likely need to be some ground truth survey work done to come up with those numbers, and to get a permit. I do want to mention it would be, again, with the interaction with the wetland management corridor, there's limited space to mitigate if there was a mitigation plan to have more fill in one spot versus, and then, make a cut somewhere else. I think it would be difficult, but maybe it could be possible to make that happen. But generally answer your question, I think more information would be needed.
Okay, so essentially at this point, if we were going to approve the floodplain fill, we'd have to see excavation somewhere else that offset that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But I don't particularly see that as is happening, but the next thing is, this is to Mr. Holtman. We have in a draft order, you have a discussion on page 5, paragraph 13, in which you sort of preserve recognition of potential rights of the landowners against the insurance company. And I think that's quite appropriate. And my question is, should we have a comparable paragraph added that would preserve the rights of the Seletsky's against the seller, Gregory Bitsky, for not having provided signage before the sale? I note that our permit was issued in March, and the sale didn't occur till, no, the permit was issued in August 2018, and the sale took place on March 2019. So he had 6 months or more to get signage on before the sale occurred. And whether or not, therefore, we should recognize a potential claim by the owner Seletsky's against Mr. Betsky. And once again, that's not for us to resolve. That would be between them to resolve. And that would also, by the way, if I understand it, the permit's still open and provide us an opportunity, if necessary, to go after the permittee, the co-permittees, particularly if we still have the surety bond available to us. So that's a question to Mr. Holman.
And Madam Chair, Manager Bradley, as you noted, the district doesn't make judgments or decisions about the claims the Seletsky's may have. The text in there presently as to the title company is simply to recognize that the Seletsky's may have a claim against the title company, and that remains open. From what the Seletsky's have said today, it suggests a set of facts where the seller may not have fully disclosed everything that he was obligated to, which of course would depend on the purchase agreement that they had and what it said. So there would be no harm if the board wanted to simply reflect that they may have claims against the seller, and that would not be, of course, for the district to decide. In addition, as you note, the permit is still open. To the extent there are violations, the district still has that right to look to the co-permittees as well, which is the seller of the property as well as the developer. Obviously, the complication here is that they're not in a position to provide remedies to these violations because they don't have a right to go on to the Seletsky's property and do that. But they do remain responsible for the lack of signage and for the fact that the shed has not been moved.
So the reason the surety availability is important is not between those two parties, but should it come to the point where we, as Rice Creek, necessary for us to go in and resolve this matter physically by ourselves, we might have a pool of money available to help us recover our costs. You have a comment on that?
Yes, I don't know factually what the nature is of the financial assurance that we still hold under the permit, but to the extent that we do, that's correct.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, staff.
Thank you. Any other board? Mr. Waller, Manager Waller. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Patrick or Terrence, what type wetland are we talking about here? 1, 2, 8, 5, 6, 4, 3? Which one?
I can
Manager
speak to-
Waller.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Patrick.
Sorry, go for it, Becky. I was going to say I'd have to look into what our past approval was. So if you know from visiting the site, I'd welcome that.
Sure. Well, that was a very complex, very large site. So that particular area, because it was adjacent to the ditch, would probably be considered a type 2, but the wetland was restored in that case. And so there's actually, at this point, no wetland impacts on the site.
Thank you very much. And is this an old farmstead?
Can you repeat the question?
Manager Waller, I would assume it is to some degree. Just looking at historical aerials of the property use.
So is it?
Go ahead, Becky.
Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. I was actually on the site, so if you don't mind, I can just real quick talk about that site. There were several cattle on the site previous to the site being developed on the north side, primarily in the pasture area. So, was it, would it fit the agricultural zoning? I believe Blaine had that at that time, potentially. So what your definition of a farmstead is, but he did have cattle on the property.
So it's a former agricultural area. And then is the buffer zone we're talking about for the wetland, or is it for the branch 1 of the drainage ditch?
Manager Waller, President Priner, the buffer zone is for the wetland in kind of the corner of the wetland that's connected or adjacent to the public drainage system.
And okay, and in that, Miss Becky, you say that's a type 2 there, not a type 1? At the time you were there?
Yep, that would be a fair analysis of that type of wetland based on what we saw when we were out there. I think it was in 2017, if I remember right, for the wetland delineation.
So are you saying you couldn't use tillage equipment on it?
Before there was a wetland buffer on there, under the Wetland Conservation Act rules that the state does allow tillage on type 2 wetlands, yes. Right. I think one of the things though, and I might be overstepping my, permitting authority, but
that's okay.
Oh, I was just going to say on the wetland buffer part or the WMC part, I think part of the problem too is that the entire site was being taken into account. Am I right, Patrick? When they were reviewing the wetland buffer and how it was implemented on that site for the whole Oakwood Ponds development, not just this property.
Yes, I can speak to that, Becky. So yes, there's a larger development here that's referred to as Oakwood Ponds. This property, although there was an existing home and some other buildings on it, was pulled into that development as a co-permittee. The property was larger, as has been identified previously. There was property north of 5362 as part of the development, and this inclusion of this parcel, it was subdivided. So what is north of 5362 is I believe an outlot, and it is also part of the WMC. So that tied it into the permit, and that's why we've established the easement and declaration on the property.
So, Madam President, so did I understand it? Really, the only issue that is here, there isn't an issue with the wetlands anymore. That's out of the way. And it sounds like those types of wetlands that are in this particular part of the entire macro picture are either 1s or 2s, and they're not something that's there's something you could use equipment on to till. And the only thing that's left is really we're talking about is the floodplain issue then. Any significance and filling the floodplain. They haven't applied for a permit yet. Is that correct? That's really what the big issue is, the floodplain?
I think the other one is the buffer signs yet have to be taken care of.
Well, yeah, the buffer signs, I understand.
Yeah.
That's but again, the buffer signs, I think you have to kind of take a look at what the wetland issue is, the delineation at the moment, Pat, because maybe these are areas that if they're type 1s, they could be tilled, that the buffer sign restrictions are meant to stop activities to protect it. And in this case, if you're going to garden in there, or you're going to drive your vehicle back and forth to get to the gardens in the area, you know, that's a permitted activity and not necessarily the placement of the signs. I think has to be reevaluated where that would be, so that you're, you know. But that's why. Am I missing something here? Or is that what the issue is? Which Manager Bradley, Mike was talking about, was how to work out a deal so that about the floodplain loss.
President Preiner?
Go ahead.
I would note that the underlying issue is the recorded easement on the property, and that's monumentation of the declaration protecting the wetland management corridor. By name, it does reference wetland, but this buffer area is developed also by the floodplain. It's adjacent to the public drainage system, the extent of its flooding, so on and so forth. This is the underlying study and adoption of the CWPMP that the district's gone through in numerous cities. It is what underlies the way the Wetland Conservation Act is administered in the district or in these CWPMPs. So without it, the buffer and the district adhering to it, some of the balance that the district looked to establish, that is allowing impacts at lower ratios in some areas and protecting those more important resources, is the balance that you got from the state in doing that. That's not to say that the buffer area and the easement could not be changed as Manager Bradley noted as a potential option. It does become cumbersome or problematic because it needs to reflect an average across the entirety of the development site. So how much flexibility is left on this parcel is unknown to us. As Terrence and Patrick noted, the district multiple times has asked them to come forward and suggest solutions that may be helpful to find a way forward.
Well, Madam President, you know, if I'm out there in the field owning a piece of property that I bought, I'm not really an expert at wetlands. I never was, you know, personally, and you know, as an individual person. So expecting the applicants here to come forward and make a suggestion on how to approve what's going on is it takes a lot of study and background that they just aren't going to have. I would hope that the staff with their particular knowledge and expertise in this area would lend some help to this and not rely totally on the applicant to provide a solution. Because yeah, in my experience, I mean, I listened to this whole presentation and I never heard anyone say it was type 1 or 2 wetland we're talking about. They just kept on talking wetland. That could have been self-predicted. And so the only reason I know that is from my longtime experience. I don't think anybody else would know that. It's just a novice property.
President Preiner?
I agree. Go ahead, Nick.
I'll note that the type of wetland really isn't relevant. I note that various types have different exemptions, so on and so forth, but it really comes back to the declaration and the easement present on the property. I wouldn't say that the district did not offer any assistance to the landowner. That did occur. I recognize that they may not be familiar with these things. Certainly the district has plenty of experience with that, such with our public drainage system. Some people think it's a creek or what have you, which is not the case. And in those cases, we have an implied easement or a factually recorded easement, and we work through those issues as we are doing here.
Well, Madam President, I would point out, not to debate the issue too much, but to point out just one other last thing. You know, oftentimes people come out and once they delineate these wetlands, they become, quote, wetlands forever or such. You know, whereas if you use the plow the day before the delineator shows up and you turn the material upside down so the dirt side's up and not the grass, it's no longer a quote wetland or you know, and this necessarily it fits all the categories of it. So I think there needs to be adjustments, and I realize the problem you're talking about, the administrators mentioning about it has to be a balance and an average and such. But in this particular case, I think that the edge of the wetland we're talking about isn't a resource that has to be highly protected. It's not a high value resource. This is a wetland. If you turn it upside down, why it would just look like one of the sod fields over there in Lino Lakes. Or
I would like to ask Mr. Holtman a question. Do we have anything where we bring the developers in to talk about this because it wasn't done while the development was being done?
Yeah.
What would our position on that be?
Madam Chair, regarding the wetland status or the more generally?
More generally, is there any responsibility there that we could talk to them about? You know, instead of having it a civil thing, which I understand it's civil, is there anything else that we could do to bring them into the questions and answers?
Well, Madam Chair, managers, the fill in the buffer and the fill in the floodplain are not actions for which the developer or the other permittees would be responsible. Those aren't activities under the permit. The permit required the filing of the easement and declaration to protect those areas as to all future users of the property. And so those concern the present landowners, the Seletsky's only. So the issues regarding the developer are the absence of signage and the fact that the shed was not moved. And so yes, in the developer under the open permit is still responsible for the fact that those are in violation. The complication is the developer doesn't have legal access to the Seletsky's property to install the signage and move the shed against the intentions of the Seletsky's. So they could play a role in working things out cooperatively, but it would be more complicated if we're not proceeding in that way.
Okay, thank you.
President.
Madam President.
Go ahead.
I just have a thank you. Mr. Holtman made me remember one other item I wanted to chat about here or mention. All of these figures I've heard today, like approximate numbers like 7,300 square feet. Well, that's 73 by 100 feet. 5,000 square feet. That's 50 by 100 feet. 15,000 feet. That's 100 feet by 150 feet. We're talking about some really minuscule areas. This doesn't even get up to be an acre. 44,000 square feet, 43,000 square feet is an acre. You know, this is really
Madam
small
Chair?
area.
Go ahead, Becky.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
President Preiner, I believe you recognized Becky. It was Manager Wynant that was speaking, so I think you.
Okay, I can't tell by
the
the
other.
Okay, Manager Wynant.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to point out that Becky did have her hand up. And two things. I just want to, I appreciate trying to find a resolution to this. And I would also note that I visited that site yesterday and drove around and may have some comments to say about the actual location. But Becky, please let us know what you're going to say.
President Preiner, I don't believe Becky is raising her hand. I think it is actually one of the developers that is raising their hand.
Ben,
yes.
Ben.
But I did want to quick before Ben speaks, I just wanted to mention, I know there has been just some discussion about the signs not being installed prior to the new landowners coming into possession of the property. I'll note that our permit with Oakwood Ponds, we don't require that the signs are installed by a specific time. They just have to be installed before the permit is closed, and that's something that gets reviewed as the developments move along. In this particular case, it's my understanding that, and the developer can speak to this, but it's my understanding that they probably install all the signs. There's not only signs on this property, but throughout the development. And it's my understanding that they likely install those signs all at the same time to cut down on costs. They don't want to come out multiple times to install signs. And they likely do not install those signs until they have somewhat of an established development pads and things like that. So the signs likely were not installed, in 2019. I think maybe fall of 2019, early 2020 is when the developer started to install those signs. And at that time, they did attempt to install signs on this property, but then obviously we have new landowners and they were declining that access. So I just wanted to make that mention that I'll let, looks like Ben wanted to speak.
Ben, please go ahead.
Hi, President Preiner, members of the board. Ben Schmidt with the Excelsior Group. Just a couple comments just by way of background. We are the developers of Oakwood Ponds, and we did, as it was pointed out earlier, we actually purchased the rear yard, or rear portion, maybe rear half of the property in question from Greg Biskey. And as part of that purchase, it was understood that, the rest of his land would be brought into our plat and therefore subject to, all the things that our plat were subject to relative to the various items that you're talking about today. We did record those easements and declaration timely in, I think August or September of 2018. And so they were of record. I can't say whether or not they showed up on someone's title commitment or not, but they certainly were put of record. And then relative to the signs, as Terrence pointed out, yes, we did attempt to, we wouldn't have tried to install the signs in 2018. I mean, we hadn't really started anything yet. But we did attempt to install those signs in 2019. And I think we installed some of our signs in 2019. Some ended up in 2020, just based on as we completed development. We did attempt to install the signs in the subject property in 2019. But, at that point, the property had passed hands. Of course, we weren't really aware of that. And so we weren't able to access the property. But relative to the shed, which maybe isn't a point that's being completely raised today, but just again, by way of background, I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding between us and Biskey, Greg Biskey at the time. So we did kind of renegotiate our deal with him and said, okay, we'll pay a couple extra bucks because we got to get that shed down. And then it was going to be our responsibility to take the shed down, and which we said we would do. But then the property passed hands. So when we went to take the shed down, it was no longer Mr. Biskey in ownership. And again, we weren't able to go and take the shed down. So we did, certainly in not only just in good faith, but in clear written form, negotiate all these points with Mr. Biskey. So that way it was a very clear understanding of what the undertaking was and who was responsible for what. And we feel very good that we've done everything we were supposed to do up until we weren't allowed access to the property. I feel it's an unfortunate situation if the current owners didn't know what the requirements were. But again, we feel very strongly that we've done everything we were supposed to do, and we'll continue to do so under our permit. And that was all I had. Happy, of course, to answer any questions. Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Steve?
Steve, you're muted.
I have a question for Chuck when you're done talking. I don't have a question for the developer.
Okay. Then thank you for speaking, and we'll go to Chuck then. Steve?
Okay. Chuck, what is the rule on recording stuff on the actual title? I mean, I had a similar situation in the past where it wasn't recorded. I'm just curious, the landowner, how would they find this stuff if it's not recorded? And is it supposed to be, or is it a time factor, some, amount of time that can pass, or how does that work?
Madam
I'm
Chair,
saying before it gets recorded on the title.
well, Manager Wagaman, the recording of an encumbrance on property title is what gives that document legal effect as to
Right.
all future owners. In this case, the record indicates that the easement and declaration were recorded on the title in August of 2018, and were on the title as of March 2019. At the time, the Seletsky's title company produced the commitment, and the Seletsky's bought the property from Mr. Biskey.
Okay, so the title company missed it, is basically what you're saying.
That appears to be true.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I think we're to a point now that we have to decide if we're going to do the proposed findings of order, or if we want to have staff correct anything in here, or however the board wishes to proceed here.
Madam Chair?
Mm-hmm. Go
I
ahead.
apologize for interrupting, but at this time, just as a formal matter, it would be good just to note for the record the documents that were presented to constitute the record here for the hearing. And I'm just looking to pull up the page that Terrence prepared, but the cover sheet on the packet of documents, it identifies 41 documents, which include some additional attachments, and 14 photographs as well. And so I would just note that those would just constitute the document record for this hearing.
Okay, so we need just to accept them, or do we need a vote? Just add it into the hearing.
You as chair can simply recognize that absent any objection or additions to that.
Okay, then I'll just proceed with that. Any absence or additions? We want to recognize all the documents provided. Let's see, is there a page number on that, or how? Well, go back to the top then, I think.
Yeah, President Pryor, there's not page numbers, but there is, okay. This is the first page of that document. And then there's another 3 pages.
President Pryor, if you wanted to state something formally, you could read the title of the document itself out at the top by the red square in the left-hand corner, record documents and so on.
The record documents, compliance hearing, the Seletsky property number 19. I'm sorry, I can't read this. I'm getting clear.
Yep.
There we go. 4919 125th Avenue Northeast Blaine on the date of 4/28/21. I'd like to admit that into the record, please. Okay, anything else, Mr. Holman?
I think, did I miss you, Miss? I think you said 420 and it's 428, isn't it?
4/28/21.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Thank you.
No, nothing more, Madam Chair.
Okay, so what do we want to propose findings in order? We should just go, who's still out there? Oh, Mike, go ahead.
So, Madam President, I don't know if I'd make this as a motion, but here's what I'd like to see happen. I'd like to see the draft order amended in 2 regards. Number 1, to amend the possible solution for the wetland management fill recovery, either to be removed as suggested in the current draft or additional dirt brought in and overseeded. So that would be one change. Second thing is I would like to see a paragraph added like we did against recognizing the potential claim by the landowners against the seller and the co-applicants, co-applicants with regard to the lack of signage at the time of the sale. Again, that's not resolving it, that's just recognizing a parcel. And third, I'd like staff to go back, as suggested by Commissioner Waller, Manager Waller, and review the question of access to the North Garden and whether or not there's a different way to handle that. And then to bring all of that back to us, say in a month. That's my points.
Okay,
Madam President,
go ahead.
I would not support taking any action on this draft document today. I don't think it's ready yet. And I agree with Manager Bradley, there's some corrections I think that need to take a look at it. I would hope we'd be able to work this problem out, resolved in the next month or so without having to take a formal action by endorsing a document for findings of fact here.
Okay, so the best way to do this then is to not act today in the proposed findings, use Manager Bradley's recommendations, and I say set a date for it to come back to us. At that point, we can discuss it further and either act or not act. Does that make sense? Is there a date that would work for the staff?
President Reiner,
Mm-hmm.
a reference was made to 1 month, which would, I guess we could say May 26. However, I think it's really important to recognize that this will require not only staff being receptive, but the landowner to come forth with information about how they want to access certain portions of the property. These things staff cannot define for them. How they access this garden area or with what equipment, is it just a wheelbarrow or is it a pickup truck? These kinds of things, how much is needed, that's unknown to us. They would have to come forward, so we would need to see that somehow. And beyond that, so it's challenging for, well, I can say May 26th, we would need the landowner to certainly recognize that it's a reasonable amount of time for them to help define what their position would be.
Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Slusky, your comments, please.
Are we talking about the floodplain or the buffer zone too?
President Reiner, I would say we are talking about both. We're talking about potential modification of the recorded easement and the declaration that represents that area. If you would like to propose a different way in which that's configured, I believe that's what the general discussion of the managers is asking. And secondly, if you are identifying the use of the property requires some floodplain fill, the draft order that was put before you include some language for you to apply for a permit. And basically floodplain fill is a balancing of fill and creating areas that could otherwise flood. And we don't know how you'd like to use the property in that way. And so you would have to identify and create those calculations.
We're okay to we're okay to restore a floodplain, but we're not agreeing about the buffer zone. As I understand that there is in Rice Creek Watershed, they look in the zone as a buffer zone and floodplain. That's the deal. But if to restore a floodplain, I don't see an issue from our side. The Rice Creek Watershed can come over and measure how much we need to restore, and they can take a test as they did before with the wetland, and we can restore that with no problem. Or we can find solution if we really need that area not to be restored. We can just find another place where we can dig out the amount of dirt needs to be.
President Reiner, I don't know that all this deliberation needs to take place here, but I think it's important for us to note that staff, Terrence and Patrick, have shared the areas that are impacted where the floodplain fill exists, and it'd be important for us to make clear that they understand how that might affect the property. So those have been presented already. We are awaiting the landowner's position on how they would like to accomplish that.
Okay. Well, I think at this time, and I think by the 26th, we should require that the Seleskis and our staff work together and come back to the board with solutions. The wetland buffer issue, I think, needs to be described a little, maybe precisely. And the signing, of course, ends up as part of that. But everybody has to do that with their permits. I'm sitting here looking at a wetland buffer sign right now. So I think we have to follow through with our procedure and our process, but I think we can certainly resolve this. There is a way. Any other questions from the board? The 26th, then we'll.
So Matt,
go ahead.
Madam Chair, do you need a motion to table this, or are you just?
I don't know. We can ask Mr. Holtman. Do we need a motion to table or just proceed with?
Madam Chair, I'd suggest that that you have a motion to place the hearing in recess.
Okay.
Until May 26th.
Very good. Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to recess this hearing and reopen it on May 26th. Anything else?
Madam President, I just want to say that my reluctance is not a comment on the quality of our staff's efforts, but rather just an effort to try to see if we can come up with a solution. And I want the Seleskis to know, if necessary, we will order these actions to be taken.
Yes, and I believe everybody feels the same. We'd like to resolve it, would be the best. Okay, we're going to have to move on to our next item.
So soon.
Madam Chair, did I miss the actual vote on the motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. We need a vote. Manager Waller.
Yes, I vote for recessing to the 26th. And I hope everyone works it out.
Manager White?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Okay, very good. Thank you. Number 4, resolution initiating Ramsey County Judicial Ditch 1 records reestablishment. Ashley.
Good morning, Madam President, Board of Managers. Before you, we have a resolution to, initiate the records reestablished proceedings for Ramsey Washington Judicial Ditch 1. Any questions? Otherwise, there is a proposed motion on page 120 of your packet.
Page 120, okay. Proposed motion. Okay.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
I would move resolution 2021-6, ordering the initiation of proceedings to reestablish and correct drainage system records for Ramsey Washington Judicial Ditch number 1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Madam President, we had a hearing about this for informational purposes, and under these trying times with the Hollywood Squares or whatever we want to call this format that I'm staring at, I thought that was an exceptional hearing, and it went very, very well. I want to compliment publicly all of the staff members that have participated in it and the consultants. They did it, considering that usually we have those in person, and that's about, I believe that's about the best that could be done. And by the way, I also want to note that the public attended this hearing. I think one of the last ones we had in public, no one came, that we had in person, but on this virtual hearing, we had several different folks that were in the audience.
Okay. Manager Waller, that was a yes?
Yes, if you're calling for the vote, I vote yes.
I am. And Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
And Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion passes.
President Prina,
Go ahead.
might be appropriate at this time for us to define the public hearing date that you would like. It's not a definitive within the order and one that staff has to work with the board on. I would think May 26th, I would offer as a potential date, the evening of the 26th. You've historically had these in the evening, 6:30 p.m.
Okay. Would we like just a separate motion to do that?
No need for a motion.
Okay.
But we want to make sure that schedules are in alignment. And you feel that is more than enough time for us to give notice to the public.
Madam President, what's the title of the hearing again, please?
This would be Ramsey, Washington Judicial Ditch 1.
And the hearing is for?
The reestablishment.
Yes. Okay.
All the rest of the board members okay with the date?
Yep.
Okay, then we're going to go ahead and set it as is. Thank you, Nick, for following that up. Ashley, No County Ditch 10/22/32 records.
So I have before you guys another resolution to for the findings and orders to initiate the records for reestablishment proceedings on Anoka County Ditch 10/22/32. On page 125, you will find a very similar proposed motion.
Okay. Somebody like to make the motion?
Madam President, before the motion, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Ashley, should it be, instead of reestablish and correct the drainage record for ACD 10/22/32, should it be establish and correct the drainage system record for the upper portions of the main trunk and branch 4 and 4A? I mean, is it material to do that?
Yes, that would be a good clarification. It is
Okay.
the upper portions of the main trunk, branch 4 and branch 4A, north of Pine Street.
Then, Madam President, go ahead. Is somebody going to say something?
Yes, Manager Bradley, excuse me, President Priner. If I could elaborate on what Ashley shared, she is definitely correct that is the focus of the district's most recent interest here. I'll note within the resolution that was created by your counsel, John Cole, he is making a distinction between some of the past activity that the districts had prior to a statute change and then post. I think it's his intent in the resolution to be clear that what we're doing here doesn't, I'll just say, to bring unity to both the previous work and the current proposed work. So I would hesitate to adjust the heading for that reason. And maybe Ashley or Chris, if you have anything to add to clarify that more.
I would agree. The resolution does clarify the past work that was done before statute changed, and then is acknowledging the work that's currently being done to clarify. So I do think the heading is appropriate, but it does, and I think it does acknowledge the different portions which are being are part of the corrections, current corrections.
Madam President?
Go ahead.
Yeah, again, Chris Otterness, the district engineer. I just wanted to note on this that, Nick is correct here that when we're completing any of these proceedings on the drainage system, we complete it on it as a system as a whole, even though our review in this particular case and our focus is really on the record that we have in that upper part of the system, but really the action that occurs on the system is an action that occurs on the system itself and not a portion of the system, if that makes sense. So that if under the statute, we look at the system as a whole, and that, I think that's why the title as it would be appropriate, but I understand Manager Bradley's comment on that, in that the focus of our review and the focus that we'll have at that hearing will really be on that upper part of the main trunk and those two branches, branch 4 and 5.
So if I understand what our staff is trying to tell me is that leave the title unchanged, but are you okay changing paragraph A of the order? Should we leave that unchanged also?
We're close. We're close to being over.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the location for the
Certainly,
potential
that's
change?
page 3 of 5, under the order section, paragraph A. What I was reading was whether we recommend that one phrase there.
Let's see if Marcy can mute her microphone. Marcy? Marcy? I guess not. There we go. Okay, good. Now try it.
So, did you get what I was saying there, Nick?
Yes, President Preiner, Manager Bradley. I would be hesitant to do that. The reason is finding number 10, that's noting the 103, 101, 4A. Is to, as Chris said, reestablish and correct the record for the entirety of the drainage system, which is then referenced, as you note, at the beginning of the order. But within, let's see, I'm trying to locate it again here. Oh, right above, I believe there might be, for lack of a better word, interference there to change that, because item 9 is recognizing the previous work, the consolidation of the system.
And that's all great. Thank you. I won't play with the language.
Fair enough.
Okay, you want to make the motion then?
I will attempt, Madam President. Madam President, I move resolution 2021-07, which authorizes us to take actions to correct the findings and order initiating, adopt resolution 2021-07, involving the findings and order initiating proceedings to reestablish records for Anoka County Ditch 10-22-32.
Somebody have a second?
Second.
I'll second it. Okay, Johnson, Manager Waller seconded.
You can second it, Pat, that's fine.
No, that's it. Any further discussion? We'll call the vote. Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winan?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
And Manager Preiner, yes. Motion passes. Thank you.
President Preiner? Similarly, we might look for a time when we might hold this meeting as well. I would be very reluctant to schedule it on the same day. I think that might be confusing for all the parties.
Yes.
The next meeting that you have is June 9th. Again, this would be a 6:30 meeting. In the absence of that, we could obviously go farther out, and would be June 23rd would be the other option.
Any preference by the board? Any preference? Well, let's go June 9th at 6:30 then.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Sunram Construction. Matt.
Madam Chair, members of the board. I have, noting the time, I will be brief. I do have a very short presentation, but it will go quickly.
Go ahead.
Sharing my screen. So we have a pay request from Sunram Construction for the Lower Rice Creek project. This is pay request number 4. At this time, we are substantially complete with construction, and most, if not all, of the shrub and live stake planting, invasive species removal, that's buckthorn. So we're essentially done, and now we're entering the vegetation establishment and maintenance period. The pay request that we're processing now is for some of the invasive species management and the shrub and live stake planting that happened this winter and spring 2021. Just a couple of photos of some of these sites. So you saw photos of these sites, I think, late last fall after they were constructed. Now we're seeing a lot of the shrubs and plugs and live stakes going in. As you can imagine, on some of these sites, especially the one on the left, the establishment of this vegetation is critical to the long-term stability and success of those sites, hence the maintenance period that we're now in, which will last almost a year. Here's just another site. This is pre-project, some of the erosion issues that we've had. This was post-project. You can see these soil encapsulated fabric lifts here along with some vegetation, and then here's with the live stakes and the plugs going in the spring. So very quickly, the budget, both on engineering and construction, we're still running a bit below budget. We have processed some change orders. That's primarily to add sites to use up some of those grant dollars that we have to pay for the majority of this project. But we are still below budget, both on engineering and construction. And that's pretty much it. I said I would make it quick. There's a proposed motion on the screen.
Any questions from the board for Matt regarding this issue? If not, do you have a motion in front of you?
Madam President, I'll move to approve partial payment to Sunram Construction for the Lower Rice Creek Stabilization Project in the amount of $8,463.64.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? I see a hand up. Is that? Whose hand was up? Oh, that was Mike.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion passes. Check register.
Madam President, I move to approve the check register dated April 28th, 2021 in the amount of $715.04 prepared by Redpath and Company.
Madam President, the number I have on page 137 isn't the number that Steve just read.
You know what? That's not right either. You're right. That's something's wrong here.
364.
Yeah, accurately, it looks like it should be 364, 336.03.
I'll second the second number.
Motion being seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Well,
here. Everybody have the right number here?
it's 364. 336.03.
Yep. That's correct.
Yeah. We have the motion, and then I vote yes.
Okay, Manager Waller, yes. Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion passes. Okay. Items for discussion. Houston Engineering is next. Chris, I believe.
Madam President, actually, it'll be Garrett that'll be presenting here today.
Okay. Garrett?
Good morning, Board of Managers. Thank you, Madam President.
Mhm.
Today we'll be sharing a kind of pre-project wrap-up discussion of what's been going on with Judicial Ditch 3 over near Hugo. I'm going to be sharing a presentation here. Just let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
Wonderful. Get it all pulled up on my side. All right. So like I said, we're nearing the end of the project time window here. Most of the work is completely done, meaning excavation and tree clearing and all the seeding and things like that we care about, making sure it gets done with an observed manner. Now it's just management of some vegetation establishment and kind of site cleanup and things like that. So we wanted to take this opportunity to show you how the project went and how we got from this situation with all this thick vegetation to this, where we have a open right of way, an excavated public drainage system, and the restoration of some water levels that we are excited to see in the area. So once again, we're talking about Judicial Ditch 3, the main trunk, and Branch 3. There are other branches of Judicial Ditch 3 that are slated for construction a few years from now, or for repair rather. But at this time, we're just going to be talking about the main trunk and Branch 3, as that's what was completed under this phase of the effort. The project started near the freeway, if you can see my cursor here, and continued upstream all the way just shy of Bald Eagle Lake, where the public drainage system ends. And then Branch 3 was completely repaired from its confluence with the main trunk all the way up to its upper reaches north of 165th there. So just a quick summary of what we did on the project. We excavated the channel, removed the trees as needed to complete the work, removed the sediment from within the channel, and then also critically important to this project, removing excess vegetation, both within the channel itself and along it to be able to complete the work. And then replacing culverts along the way that were either at elevations that didn't allow the drainage system to perform as intended, or that were in poor condition. And in some cases, we added culverts here, particularly in partnership with the city within the park, the Clearwater Creek Park Preserve, to enable access for their future development of the park, as well as, I'll say, I always hesitate to say the word improve, but really improve access for district staff to complete inspection and maintenance of the public drainage system.
Great, careful with that.
Couple photos doing a before and after comparison. We'll hop around a little bit, but this is near station 105 of JD3 Branch 3. So we're talking kind of a little bit south of 165th in a predominantly ag area. So this is north of some of the development. This is where some proposed development is happening right now. It's in the permitting process, but you can see we're looking south here to the houses that are just north of 159th, if you're familiar with the area. There's a field crossing here. Previously, this was one of the toughest stretches of the public drainage system, where the channel's quite deep, and it was very heavily vegetated, lots of trees on both sides. And due to conversation with the landowners in this area, as well as the knowledge of upcoming development, the Drainage Authority approved us to go forward with clearing trees on both sides of the channel. So that's something to note here, that was actually desirable. And also took the opportunity to remediate some existing spoil piles that were pretty rough. So this is one of the sites that I wanted to highlight because there was a lot of interaction and coordination with landowners in both the current, historical, and future land use in the area. This is from 159th looking north. So similar view shed just from the other end, if you will. Another area where near a public roadway, the drainage system was very heavily vegetated. And now we have an opportunity to access the public drainage system to complete inspection and maintenance. This is an area where debris was regularly building up against the culvert. Now it's able to be accessed and have the grate cleaned off and things like that. This is just south of 159th now, where there's a park. This is where we get into the area where it's very interesting. We have these wetland mitigation areas right adjacent to the public drainage system. We're glad that they are persisting as we anticipated they would. The water surface elevation between these mitigation areas and the public drainage system itself actually is a couple feet. So this little berm does quite a lot to hold back water. But again, a lot of vegetation was here beforehand, tight working area. And the contractor did a great job of making sure to not impact wetlands while restoring the function of the public drainage system and enabling access so that future maintenance and inspection can even occur. This used to be very hard to even walk through to do a visual inspection of the public drainage system. Similar area, this is looking south now as we head towards 157th. Previously, again, wetland mitigation areas. There was a bridge in this area that the landowner did not want. So that was removed. You can see that in this photo. Tree clearing on both sides with coordination from the landowners to remove some of these trees that were either not in good shape or looking like they might eventually fall into the public drainage system, while protecting some of the healthy ones to keep some shade in their backyards. So again, another opportunity where landowner meetings were extremely helpful in informing how the project could be completed, so that they had the opportunity to identify trees that could be kept, as well as coordinating with landowners who just wanted them all gone because they want that sunlight in so their grass grows. Another great opportunity where the board's efforts to coordinate with landowners helped improve the end condition of the project. This is near Station 35. So now we're moving south of 157th, getting towards the City Pond area. Just update my map here on the side. In this area, it was more about gaining access to the public drainage system. So there's a good stretch of the drainage system where no excavation was needed. Clearly, this is not one of the spots, but within this view, when you get up here a little more, that's where the city ponds are. So in here, able to remove vegetation within the channel, get this access back that's so critical to do that inspection and maintenance. And as we continue downstream, looking at the confluence with branch 3, used to be heavily vegetated, a lot of stagnant water, and you'll see that a lot in some of the previous conditions photos, a lot of stagnant water where there were blockages and debris. And here, you know, egg practice nearby, making sure that we left side inlet drainage here or side inlet swales to provide that backside drainage. This is one of the areas where vegetation is establishing nicely. Clear those trees so we can get access through here. One thing you can start to note, if you haven't already, is particularly in main trunk, seeing the drop in what we'll call the normal water elevation of the public drainage system. Already seeing a lowering of that, the foot that we were anticipating by restoring the capacity of the public drainage system. So you'll definitely see that throughout the main trunk as we continue looking at these. Again, in main trunk, one of the things to note is a lot of brush was removed from the ditch banks where previously you could hardly access or walk. Did a lot of brush mowing. One of the things that'll be important is continuing to maintain that in the future. These did have a woody vegetation herbicide applied to them, but it'll be important, as with all of public drainage system projects, to make sure that we understand there's going to be need for continued maintenance and inspection after the project. And that's one of the things we tell the owners ahead of time. And one of the things that's important for, you know, getting the access back with that right of way, clearing out the trees, making sure that this brush stays knocked down into the future. Again, just pop back up to branch 3 here real quick. We're going to look at a couple spots north of 165th. Where there was a lot of dense vegetation, some drainage issues with backside drainage in the area, making sure we provided some side inlets, a newer, wider ditch crossing where there was a previously quite small one, and continuing upstream from there where we used to have a lot of evergreens, coniferous trees bordering the drainage system. Now making sure that, actually this is main trunk here. I got two photos together. But looking at the main trunk here, this is the kind of development near Onika, south of Main Street there, Frenchman Road. Getting a lot of that brushy vegetation clear here. And we'll see a couple more photos of that too. So this is continuing upstream or to the south towards Bald Eagle Lake from that development. This is where we get to where there's some private drainage ditches tributary to the public drainage system, making sure that culverts could be installed where those confluents are so that the district could keep access contiguous along the public drainage system. Also getting the crossings, of course, of the public drainage system replaced at the proper elevation. And then also working with the landowner in this area. I don't have a photo of it to share with you, but right here at the property line where the city trail does end here, making sure that there was a change order completed to put up a fence in coordination with the private landowner and a gate, which the district has a key for, making sure we're not promoting or allowing to the extent practicable any trespassing. Making sure pedestrians know that there is a property change and that the right of way of the public drainage system is not a public walking path. So making sure that landowners' private rights are protected as well through the completion of the project. Going through the park, of course, getting that right of way cleared and the woody vegetation cleared from within the channel. There were a number of beaver dams within the channel prior to the project. This is one where it might be hard to tell, but there's about a foot of elevation drop across this beaver dam. And of course, they have a lot of fuel to build them. So getting the opportunity to have this inspection and maintenance corridor to be able to have an access path that's been coordinated with the city to make sure that equipment can get in here into the future to make removal of what I'm sure will be future beaver dams removed more easily. Makes a much easier process, reduces Ashley's headache into the future, or any drainage staff who are dealing with that situation. There were also several rock dams that weren't really functioning in a beneficial capacity anymore, that were obstructions of the public drainage system that we talked about in the repair report. You know, making sure that those were removed as part of the project. The conditions, the water elevation was higher and the bottom was so mucky prior to the repair that only one of these was able to be found of the original 6 that were constructed. All 6 were removed as part of the repair. So that's a good thing to note. And then as we get towards the upstream here of the main trunk, seeing that this maintenance area is, or access is available. There's a wetland mitigation area here that we got to avoid by working on this side of the ditch and installing, you know, a culvert over here, making sure you could cross with equipment and get down to this flat without having to come down a steep embankment from the road. And then continuing to look north from the bridge, seeing where the work was completed up to branch 1. So just a quick review of the financials. The original contract amount for this project was a little over $670,000. We had about $8,500 to $9,000 in change orders. Some minor issues, like I said, adding those private fences or in gates. Some field orders to track any changes in quantities or changes in pipe lengths, and a couple of changes in quantities, including the installation of a more erosion control blanket than anticipated in areas where, you know, we just needed to beef up the stabilization a little bit. Our estimated final construction cost is going to be just under $700,000. The reason we're not yet there is we still have remaining items of paying out some additional seed and mulch, as well as the remainder of their SWIP documentation, just to ensure that permits get closed out. You know, for that, we have to ensure that they reach 70% of expected vegetation. So it just takes a little time. And then also just making sure site cleanup and any needed repairs are completed. What we originally budgeted, or what the board approved in a budget for this project, was the original contract amount plus a 20% contingency, and that was just north of $800,000. Clearly, we're within that. And just a note that the pre-bid engineer's estimate for this project that was used in some budgeting materials was just north of $1 million. That's helpful to know that those dollars are there in the district's budget to help with this system. Noting that additional inspection and maintenance will need to occur, and it's always good to come in under budget. That feels well. One thing to note is that the city's obligation of that just under $700,000 of the estimated final construction cost is just under $50,000. And that's consistent with the board's decision and management to date of public drainage systems and consistent with statute that crossing owners are responsible for their crossings. That would be roadway culverts and the sort. So that's paying for, a culvert under a walking trail and some of the roadways, things like that. So like I said, the items remaining for project closeout, getting their final closeout submittals, making sure the site is fully restored, certifying final payment, and then we'll be submitting as-built drawings. And once those are complete, we're nearly there. Just want to make sure that any last minute changes are reflected before those are finalized. As I mentioned a couple different times, it's important to note that future maintenance will be needed. The district has a mowing and spraying plan to manage vegetation along the public drainage system. The schedule is to inspect yearly, every 5 years, and every 10 years at various levels, whether it's an annual walkthrough, every 5 years, maybe a drone flight, and every 10 a full survey. Things like that are all part of the district's inspection schedule. It's important to note that sediment will deposit in the channel and there will be need for future touch-ups. One of the things that we're working with the city on is addressing ditch banks near their ponds where there have been some stability issues and recognizing that there will be need for continued inspection and maintenance of those areas. Just to underline the fact that spot maintenance will be needed. Just a quick shout out to the project team. The contractor on this project was Lametti & Sons. One of the reasons that we were able to come in under budget was they're right there on the public drainage system. They were familiar with it, and that was a great asset in this situation. Their project manager, Dave, was great to work with. The district lead on public engagement, of course, was Ashley Ritchie. Pleasure to work with her as always. I managed the project, and our primary construction observer was Spencer Whipperforth. So big shout out to them. Thanks for helping this project go smoothly and, in my opinion, successfully. That's all I have for you. So at this time, I'd entertain any questions you might have.
First of all, thank you, Garrett. Job well done. Any of the board members have any questions or comments?
Madam President.
Go ahead.
Garrett, or maybe someone else, give me an update on the natural gas pipeline.
Madam President, Manager Waller.
Yes.
So yeah, that has been something that we've had discussions on with DNR staff because DNR in some cases have licensed the crossings at various locations, and in others they may have an interest in being involved with licensing them and making sure that they're at a proper elevation. We are continuing to coordinate on some of the pipeline crossings outside of this particular area, but it would certainly be the intent to start picking off one by one any of these crossings that we've identified that are obstructing the system and coordinating with the managers of those pipelines to determine or to have them informed on the issue and find ways to resolve it by lowering. So we haven't again done anything in particular with this one that we're aware of yet on JD3, but it will be part of that process that we're continuing to work forward on.
All right, thank you.
Madam President, Garrett, who is Spencer? Who does Spencer work for?
She's an employee of Houston Engineering, part of our team.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? If not, any questions on the staff reports? Any questions on that or the May calendar?
President Preiner, just noting the new item on the May calendar, May 26th, evening meeting at 6:30 for Ramsey, Washington, JD1.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, administrator updates.
Yes, President Preiner, quickly, I have two items. One, to just note that the district staff has utilize the professional services policy, and we released a request for proposal to study Peltier and Centerville Lake and their backflow, or the interaction between those two bodies of water. And we will bring that back to the board probably at the May workshop. And then at the Metro Mod meeting, you, I believe, heard discussion on the watershed-based implementation funding and how Bowser is administrating that. They've had a pilot program and are trying some different methods. It's my understanding that the Mod board will be voting on a policy position where they would like to see it fully watershed-based. We'll see what happens on their end, and we can bring it back to you folks to see if you'd like to support or send your own letter or otherwise regarding that. So no other updates.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Manager updates.
Madam
start with
President, I wasn't able to attend the MOD session. I assume that the presentation was that we're going to get a lot more money from Bowser, but maybe I
Well, you're not quite right, but that's okay.
Oh.
Okay, manager updates. Marcy, are you still there?
Marcy is still here. Sitting
Okay.
in a beautiful park in Portage, Wisconsin. So thanks for putting up with the technology issues I had while we were traveling. I would just say that I appreciate, Manager Bradley, your thoughts about the item on 125th Street. And it gets complicated, as all of you know firsthand, about what happens when you have development encroachment on prior agricultural land. So thanks to the staff and to board members as we try to unravel that. So thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Marcy. Have a good trip. Okay, Manager Waller.
Yes, Madam President, I attended the MOD meeting with you by telephone. I heard a suggestion by one of the executive board members of the MOD that we start asking for all the money that is going on a proposed bill. There's apparently a bill in the legislature that says they'll put $15 or $25 on all land transactions, and one of our executive members wanted all of that money to come directly to watershed districts. And I started to giggle about it. And so I got caught. And Miss Mary Texer said, John Waller, I heard you giggling, and what? Well, I was giggling because, first of all, that bill is by Representative Hansen. And if anyone knows Representative Hansen, he's not always a great fan of watershed districts, but he certainly is of soil and water conservation districts. He was elected to the Soil and Water Conservation District many years ago in Dakota County. That began his profession of being a representative, and now he's in charge of the Environmental Committee. So I didn't see any reason to pull his chain. But what's more important to me is that let the Soil and Water Conservation Districts have this money. We've been supporting them a long time. Sometimes we get a really good deal out of it, like if we hire somebody and they get some work and change. But we're handing out $40,000 a year now and have for a number of years, and that's practically enough money to do a project in a city. And I would point out that in my county, I'm not familiar with the rest of yours. I know Ramsey Counties is now part of the park system. But the only people I've seen lose a job in the Soil and Water Conservation Districts of the three counties are the elected members in Ramsey. Our county has gone from 6 members 20 years ago, employees and 5-member board, to almost 20 employees now. And at the time I was on a governance committee in 97, 98, that's what the big fear was, there'd be no Soil and Water Conservation District. So, they're not short of funds if they went from 6 employees to 18 to 20. They're doing pretty well. And I think that's something we should recognize. I think Anoka Counties is also doing well too. And So we might think about how we, just the cash contribution to them. Maybe that $40,000 that we hand out annually could be used on projects here in our cities or something, you know. I don't mind contracting them for labor services or using their having them provide engineering services that they have. Those have been very good buys. But the idea that the Soil Water Conservation District doesn't have any money, well, they got all the money out of the Clean Water Fund last year and the year before, you know, and we've gone from having thousands of dollars awards down to, I guess, hundreds maybe, instead of it being in the, you know, millions that we had some $1 million awards and now we're down into hundreds, you know, so. Anyways, that's all of my comment about it. I didn't think that was a very smart thing to pursue that legislation, that adjustment to the legislation, leave the legislation alone.
Okay, Manager Bradley.
Nothing except for I will be at the CAC coming up on the May 5th.
Manager Wagaman.
Yeah, one thing, last week, Rice Creek met with the pipeline people out on 10/22/32, and I attended that, and I think they did find, or I know they found the pipeline and where it was at, and I think it was at the as constructed, if I'm not mistaken, and there was like 4 feet of dirt above it, and they allowed Roger to dig out just 2 feet of dirt, which left a 2-foot impediment in the ditch. But even with that, it looked like Niagara Falls when they pulled that 2 feet of dirt out of there. It ran forever. So I guess they found it, and it certainly is a problem for sure. So I just wanted to report that they got that done and that I was there. So that's it.
Madam President?
Good start. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, to follow up on Manager Wagaman's comment, yeah, he's correct on that. Our surveyor was out there and we shot the top of the pipe there while Roger was out there doing the work there, and he also described it as being very much like that, almost Niagara Falls coming out of there. So it's good that we got some relief there, but as you said, Manager Wagaman, there's more that needs to be done because even if the pipe is at that as constructed elevation, because of their cover requirements, you know, it needs to be lowered in order to be able to allow adequate cover over there, yet have the ditch not be blocked. So there'll be more to come on that.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Good deal.
Yeah, that's good to see it moving along. And yep. I don't have anything new. I think I was at MOD also. I heard what John heard. Yeah, it's a pity the way it's going because we just aren't getting the funding we should be having to do our projects. So anyway, anybody want a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn, Madam President.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All right. Thanks, guys. Yep.
See everybody later.
Goodbye now.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. Yep. Hola. We're still hanging on here. See if we can keep these people off. Some of the things.